So a rather unfortunate incident took place the other week in my home city. I'm sure it's not the first of its kind, but it's the first time I've been aware of something like it happening within the sphere of my local music scene. It involves a very well-established live music venue here in Sydney. I've played there myself in the past, and they've long had a strong reputation for supporting local and emerging talent. I'm not going to identify them here because I don't want to draw any negative attention their way, because I don't think it's deserved, as I hope you'll come to agree shortly. But what started this whole thing off initially was a Instagram reel posted by a local artist named Aiden. Before I go any further, you should check him out and follow him on Instagram. He's a phenomenal musician who's been playing for years and deserves more followers. I asked his permission to play us here. As I said, I've redacted the names of both the venue and everyone else involved, but I think this should pretty much give you a lowdown of what happened.
Last night I played a gig at in Sydney, and the artist that played before us was AI generated. Our band was playing as part of one of events, the lineups of which are put together by the agency. The artists do not have control over the lineup. At no point was it disclosed to us that we would be playing with an AI artist. In fact, we only found out because a member of another band had happened to go through their Instagram account. The account contains AI-generated visuals over what I'm fairly certain is AI-generated music, lyrics, and vocals. Worse still, there was no disclosure on any of the event's promotional material that it contained an artist that was AI-generated. As a musician, it is a complete insult to be put on a lineup with someone who uses technology that can only exist because of the large-scale theft of the work of my other fellow human musicians. I don't know if was aware that this was an AI-generated artist when they booked them. If they weren't, then whoever is booking for them needs to do a little bit more research, just look at the account. It's fairly obvious what's going on here. If they were aware, then I'm going to find it very hard to justify paying to attend one of their events in the future, knowing that there may be an AI artist on the lineup. As streaming platforms become increasingly inundated with AI slop, live music must be defended as an avenue for human creative expression.
So a pretty unfortunate development, especially in a relatively small city like Sydney, where the independent music scene is very tight-knit and word tends to spread very quickly. So that reel went viral very fast, and news media did pick up on this, with articles appearing in the Sydney Morning Herald, ABC Online and elsewhere. And the booking agency in question did very promptly address the situation in what I think was a very timely and appropriate manner. Just to read a bit of their response here. I'll take full responsibility. I didn't look at this particular artist's socials, and their representative's communication used wording consistent with genuine artists. Their representative described them to us as a producer who used live vocals in their sets. This person was booked through an agency who presented themselves as a professional. I hadn't seen them live, but now looking at their socials, their content is clearly and blatantly AI. Artists are compensated for their work by selling tickets using a unique code. 100% of the ticket sale revenue generated by each artist goes directly to the artist. And have never knowingly and will never book people who use AI to generate music. For those who don't know us, is passionate about supporting and doing the right thing by real artists. We run a yearly initiative called Greater Good. Likewise, has long been a place where new and emerging artists play their first shows, develop their skills, and connect with their audience. We'll ensure to review our vetting processes moving forward. We'd never want to be placed in a position where we're encouraging the use of AI and financially supporting the theft from artists on which AI is trained. To put our money where our mouth is, we'll also make a donation to Support Act. Additionally, we'd love to have you back so we can make it right. Apologies and thanks for bringing it to our attention. We'll make sure to do better. We don't support AI, we support genuine artists. So clearly this whole ordeal was simply a case of human oversight and completely unintentional. I think we all appreciate that as humans we're imperfect creatures and all occasionally prone to error. God knows I've certainly slipped up in the past in ways I don't even want to think about. And as an independent musician myself, I certainly don't hold any ill will against either the agency or the venue whatsoever. On the contrary, it's actually been really pleasing to see them address this in such a forthright and transparent manner, even going the extra mile to make amends for what really at the end of the day comes down to a singular error in an otherwise stellar history of support for local artists. That's exactly the type of culture that I think we all want to foster, and I think they should be applauded for that. But I don't want to focus on this specific event so much as the dialogue it's ignited online, because while, as you'd imagine, the reaction from the local music scene has been very passionate, I've unsurprisingly seen the usual AI prompt bros crawling out of the woodwork to vigorously advocate in defense of their so-called art. This includes the aforementioned anonymous AI artist himself, who appears to have tried to make some justification. So I want to take a look at these arguments put forth by him and his contemporaries, I guess you'd call them, to see whether they actually hold any merit. I think you can probably already tell what my position is going to be, but before all you prompt jockeys finish writing your very valuable opinions in the comments section, if you consider yourself to be an artist who has integrity as part of their character, I'd at least request that you listen until I've addressed the 5 key arguments that I've seen most frequently in defense of AI in music creation. Some of these you would have heard before, others have emerged a little bit more recently. Please note, by the way, that if I use the term artist in relation to AI users in this video, it's in the absolute loosest sense possible. And although I've tried to break this video down into intelligible subsections, I'm probably going to meander and digress quite a bit. So think of this as a stream of consciousness commentary rather than a video essay. Also, it's depressing I should have to say this, but alas, it's the internet. While I'm sure some people are going to do the extra digging to find the names of the people I'm omitting, please do not troll, harass, or ideally even attempt to contact anybody connected in any way. Just to reiterate, my interest is not in the specific events or individuals mentioned here, but rather the broader dialogue surrounding the subject of AI use in music creation. Although we obviously have strong disagreements with one another, it's important to remember that we're all human beings here and certain boundaries need to exist. Argument 1. AI is just another tool. So this is undoubtedly the most common argument I hear. Our anonymous friend certainly seems to think this is the case, and it seems to be his main argument in response to criticism. In an email obtained by the Herald, I believe this was originally sent to the Venue, though I'm a bit unsure whether this was before or after the public attention. He writes, "In 1982, the Musicians' Union tried to ban synthesizers and drum machines because they argued that the technology would replace people. Nowadays, there would hardly be any songs in the top 40 or dance floors across the world that doesn't use at least one synthesizer or drum machine. Our industry is constantly being broken by technological change. In fact, the breaking up of the music making method is the only constant thing across the years. Yes, I do use AI in my production process, a process that has helped me to build a musical base so I can sing live in public and broadcast the messages that I've written into the lyrics. Despite what you may have heard, it's not easy to create quality music in this manner and still takes many hours, days and weeks." Of course, you can't help but wonder if ChatGPT was used to come up with that response. But this always seems to be the go-to argument for proponents of AI music, that generative AI is just another tool in the arsenal of creators. That's the exact term I've seen thrown around most frequently by proponents, so why don't we take a minute to look up the dictionary definition of that word. Anything used regularly in the course of a particular profession or occupation. For example, words are the tools of the writer's trade. It can also refer to a penis or stupid person, but I assume those aren't the definitions that AI proponents had in mind. So what this argument is basically doing is conflating generative AI with things like synths, drum machines, digital recording and so forth. Basically other technologies which have disrupted the industry in the past. Here's the problem though. A synthesizer does not decide which notes to play. A drum machine doesn't program patterns by itself. And no, I'm obviously not accounting for presets in this, by the way. A DAW, while admittedly basic AI features are starting to gradually become more pervasive, like with the latest versions of Logic, doesn't and is not designed to automatically produce a song for you. All of these things exist downstream from the decision making of a human being. But beyond that, the fundamental relationship with these technologies is also different. I drew a little handy diagram here in freeform to help illustrate the difference. In instances of human creativity, a human being makes creative decisions which a tool then renders or records, resulting in finished music. In instances of AI use, a human being specifies a desired outcome, and AI then makes creative decisions attempting to achieve that outcome. Notice how the process is effectively inverted in the latter example. Put simply, in human creativity, a human authors and a tool executes. In AI instances, a human directs and AI authors. You know, there may at least be some argument to be made that if you were to personally conceive of and develop a program which is capable of generating music according to prompts, you'd have legitimate creative claim to it. In other words, if you basically created Suno by yourself. But that's not what's happening here with AI proponents. They're paying 10, 20, 30 or however much a month it is to rent access to an existing platform owned by a company that markets itself as removing the need for creativity. That's not an exaggeration either. If you've encountered an advertisement for Suno or a similar platform, that's how they market themselves. Everyone can be a musician, no talent or creativity needed. It's honestly remarkable that here in the year of our Lord, wherever we're up to, it's actually necessary to explain to grown adults why opening a browser and typing sad, lo-fi beat female vocals breakup vibes or whatever into a text box and hitting enter does not make you a creator. It makes you a customer. Congratulations, you ordered a song the same way you order a quarter pounder, with no pickles, extra onions on a steamed bun with tartar sauce because I'm unique and special. You didn't cook the burger, you didn't even assemble it. You don't get to put on the apron and take a bow. Now look, this is not to say that AI has no utility whatsoever in the creative process. Many producers in studios use it to diagnose and troubleshoot problems. I can absolutely appreciate how it can be used in an educational capacity. Explain what parallel compression is and when I should use it in a mix. What's the difference between an 1176 and an LA2A? What types of audio files should I send to a mix engineer? How can I get a usable snare sound using only an SM57 and a second-hand dildo? There are contexts in which AI is helpful as a tool, but that's not what we're talking about here. here, and you know that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the guy who's never touched an instrument, never learned a scale, never sat with a bad idea until it became a good one, now suddenly dropping a single every other day because the marginal cost of generating slop is zero. It's just plain disingenuous and bad faith to pretend the distinction isn't obvious. And I really don't think there's much more I can say in response to this argument that hasn't been said 1,000 times over by other people at this point. Except that if you honestly don't see the distinction between creating something yourself with your own knowledge and skills and typing a prompt into a box and hitting generate 10 times until it doesn't sound like garbage, then I don't know what to tell you, except don't touch the red part of the stove. Argument 2. AI is the natural technological progression of the industry. This next argument relates pretty closely to the first, but I feel like it leans more on history to justify itself, so I've given it its own section. Basically, the idea is that the music industry has gone through so many transformations over generations, and new developments, either technological or otherwise, have always been subject to what you might call gatekeeping. Our anonymous friend brought up the instance of the Musicians' Union attempting to ban electronic instruments in the early 1980s, by way of example. And while this does have some factual basis, I think it's omitting a few critical nuances. From what I could gather after looking up the case, I admit this was a little bit before my time, I hope you can tell. The genesis for this came back to a tour by Barry Manilow, wherein synthesizers were utilised in place of several real orchestral musicians. At the time, a number of Musicians' Union members were fearful that these and similar electronic instruments may replace real human musicians in live orchestral settings. So in 1982, the MU did indeed pass a motion to ban the use of synths, drum machines, and any similar devices. And yes, on the surface, this does indeed sound similar to concerns related to AI today. However, this comparison doesn't account for the fact that there didn't seem to be any argument about the inherent artistic merit of using a synthesizer or a drum machine to create music. Rather, the issue lied very specifically in the imitation of orchestral instruments, which, as this article on Music Radar points out, synths were terrible at in the 1980s. Where they exceeded, and where they continue to do so today, is in the creation of their own distinctive sounds. But this is aside from the more important fact that the Musicians' Union constitutes a singular organisational body which chose to exercise its authority to pass a ban. Many musicians, that is, actual musicians, disagreed with the action entirely at the time, some even going so far as to form a separate organisation, the Union of Sound Synthesists. And this isn't even to mention the fact that electronic instruments had already been embraced by a huge swath of the broader music industry. I mean, think of the 1980s, Gary Newman, New Order, Prince. I'm not even going to try and go on, the list is so expansive. So this example was not an instance of collective opposition from artists. Rather, it was the action of an individual organisation in response to the concerns of a very specific subset triggered by a singular controversial instance. And the fact is, the Musicians' Union was swimming against the tide from the get-go, because synths today are deeply ingrained across so many facets of the music industry, and you'll be very hard-pressed to find anyone arguing that they lack creative merit. AI, on the other hand, is not impacting just a single subsect of the industry. It's impacting the entire industry at large. The imitative capacity of generative AI is designed to encompass literally every element and genre, from pop to rock to classic to lo-fi and beyond. Nothing and nobody is safe from its tendrils. But on a related note, I've also seen arguments related to this notion of boundary pushing, wherein AI proponents argue that their craft exists within the realm of experimental or avant-garde genres. I don't buy into this either. Experimental genres do exist on a very wide spectrum, with bands like Throbbing Gristle, Einstürzen Neubauten, Swans, and so many others pushing the boundary of what audiences might consider to constitute music. But whether or not their particular styles are to your taste or not, I don't think their artistry can be called into question, because their work is, again, the result of human agency and creative decision-making, whereas AI can only imitate this. Now that said, there are some greyer areas that can be brought in here, like the debate over whether sampling has musical merit. In some ways, I kind of see these debates as similar to debates over modern art. Is a banana taped to a wall art if someone claims it's such? These kinds of arguments have vehement proponents on both sides, and I don't think we're ever going to come to a collective consensus, at least not anytime soon. But the salient point is that a human being scrawling their signature on a urinal, or taping a banana to a wall, or literally delivering a bunch of blank canvases to an art gallery is still an act of human choice and agency, even if the goal is simply provocation. Incidentally, can AI consciously choose to provoke an audience through controversy? A human being can instruct it to try and do so, but can AI make the decision of its own volition? Kind of amusingly, on the flip side of this, I've also seen some AI proponents argue that so much of popular music today is already formulaic to the extent that it lacks genuine creative merit. Like McDonald's team of food scientists and engineers, we've pretty much isolated the exact components which make a particular song appealing, and we've just been repeating that process to infinity for the past 30 years. And while I'd probably be inclined to agree with this, this on some level, it's like the pot calling the kettle black. Basically pointing at the other guy and saying, "Ugh, what about him? But Hillary's emails, ugh." Lack of originality or derivative forms of creation are not the same as the absence of creativity, which is exactly what AI is. All that AI does is attempt to recognise and recreate patterns. Argument 3. AI allows for the democratization of creativity and is therefore a net benefit. This is a really strange argument to see being brought up in the current day and age because there are actually two angles to this, one of which is obvious and the other maybe a little less so, at least to non-creatives. For most of the 20th century, the process of recording ranged from essentially impossible for the average person to at best prohibitively expensive for anybody except major label artists. It was only really from the 1980s onward that newer technologies like the 4-track recorder gradually started to shift this and make recording accessible for the masses. In the 2020s, we're extremely lucky today that recording technology accessibility is wider than any other point in human history. If you're a young teenager with just a few shifts at McDonald's, you can pick up a used Focusrite Scarlett, SM58, MIDI keyboard and headphones, and with that you've got pretty much all you need to begin learning music production. Free software like GarageBand is plentiful. Tutorials and instructions on YouTube are abundant. And yes, as mentioned, AI can be a powerful learning tool in the journey of developing artists today. The technological bar for entry today is so low, I'd hesitate to say it really even exists anymore. But the fact is that irrespective of this low barrier of entry in the technological sense, the music industry is an extremely uneven playing field in other ways. Today, the main barriers which exist for most artists relate to personal investments, time and money, the ability to support oneself and earn a living while still trying to create art. There's a reason why the select few artists who are lucky enough to be successful are often born with guaranteed financial backing and industry connections. Not thinking of anyone in particular, by the way, just saying. And the distinction between these types of barriers is what confuses me about this argument. Is AI seeking to address technological barriers? I certainly don't think so, because as we've discussed, the necessary tools are widely accessible to almost anyone now. So does that instead mean it's seeking to redress imbalances in opportunity afforded to a very small minority that isn't to others? Well, that sounds lovely in theory, except it's not doing that. All it's doing is removing the necessity of actually being creative within a craft. Let's say, for argument's sake, every musician embraced AI tomorrow. So we've got AI mixers, AI music videos, AI press kits and so forth. What does the world of tomorrow look like? My guess? Probably pretty bland and formulaic. You remember Syndrome's line from The Incredibles, "When everyone's super, no one will be"? What was he getting at there exactly? We don't typically hear songs or see performances by our favourite artists and think, wow, anyone can do that. No, we admire them specifically because they've dedicated years or decades to their craft, to develop a voice that no one else possesses. If a machine can instantly generate an endless stream of songs that imitate every conceivable style, then uniqueness itself starts to lose its value. Not because human creativity has disappeared, but because it's being buried underneath an avalanche of effortless imitation. If everybody in the world is able to generate 10 songs before breakfast, an individual song doesn't become meaningful, it becomes disposable. If anyone can type a sentence into a text box and instantly produce something that sounds professionally written or composed, then we're not elevating creativity, we're flattening it. Creative industries as a whole are extremely unequal playing fields. And when that's the case, are you seriously going to argue that removing factors of actual talent and skill is good for democratization? We're all old enough to understand the difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome, right? Personally, I think we should be focused on trying to achieve the former. And that's something that goes beyond the music industry. That's something we need to look at and address on a broader societal level. In short, barrier to entry is simply not an argument. Argument 4. If an artist's use of AI is disclosed, then it is or should be permissible. So the AI artist in the incident we talked about at the beginning of this video stated that their use of AI was disclosed on their social media. We are a band of 3 made up of 2 avatars or robots and a human being. And the human being does the live performance vocals. Which, yes, I guess this is technically acknowledging the use of AI, but it seems to be doing so in a very roundabout sort of way. You remember that other band from about a year or so back, the Velvet Sundown? The one that tried to sneak onto Spotify masquerading as a real human outfit until everybody caught on that they were entirely computer generated. This is how they updated their bio after they were outed. They described themselves as a synthetic music project guided by human creative direction and composed, voiced and visualised with the support of artificial intelligence. Have you ever seen George Carlin's sketch about euphemisms? If you haven't, you should look that up. But what I'm seeing here is that in both of these instances, there seems to be a pretty unmistakable reluctance to acknowledge the simple reality that this content was generated through AI, which is curious because if you sincerely believe that AI music has the creative or artistic merit that you claim it does, why do you feel the need to cloak that simple fact behind so much verbiage? I mean, some of this literally reads like corpo lawyer speak. All characters, stories, music, voices, and lyrics are original creations generated with the assistance of artificial intelligence tools employed as creative instruments. And here resemblance to actual places, events, or persons, living or deceased, is purely coincidental and unintentional. It's like the disclaimer screen at the start of GTA. I mean, for what reason would you feel the need to write a bio like this? Unless you're Marilyn Manson in the 90s, or you're already anticipating you're going to be hauled before the court of public opinion. But all this is taking away from the obvious point that AI-generated content cannot exist without the wholesale and largely unauthorised scraping of real artists' work. And although this is the aspect which most artists, big and small, find objectionable, and rightly so, I'm actually not going to spend time talking about this here. Firstly, because it's already been discussed to death by people far more eloquent and legally knowledgeable than me, but also because I feel fairly confident that AI proponents at large simply do not care about this aspect. So it's really a waste of breath to even bring it up. But what I do want to touch on is the difference between human inspiration and AI training. A human musician usually listens to thousands of songs and draws inspiration from them. Sometimes that influence is obvious, sometimes less so. AI companies, on the other hand, harvest data on an industrial scale, usually without artist permission, and use that data to train models on, then renting access to that model. There's no authentic engagement on a human level with that material. It's just the recognition and reconstruction of particular patterns. Which is why if you ask AI to write a set of lyrics in the style of a particular artist, say Leonard Cohen, Tom Waits or Nick Cave, you'll find that some superficial qualities will probably be present, but it'll be completely devoid of any deeper meaning, which will be very obvious to any human reading them. I know I've deviated a little on this point, but simply acknowledging the use of AI in your process does not absolve you from actively engaging in and benefiting from a process which robs from real human artists. Argument 5. It's the future. Yeah, this is my favourite. AI is the future. You just have to accept it. Well, that can be said about a lot of things. Climate change is the future. We just have to accept it. Nuclear annihilation is the future. We just have to accept it. Getting mushed on the tracks underneath an oncoming train is the future. Do I just have to accept that? No, I think I might move off the fucking tracks, as a matter of fact. Now, I'm being a bit facetious here, yeah, obviously, but the point is, just because the current road we're on seems to be leading in a certain direction doesn't mean we as a community cannot take steps to avoid or at least mitigate potential harm. It seems like the people who argue this have such cynicism or even outright contempt for the notion that we as humans have any sort of agency or capacity for self-determination. AI is the future, that's just a fact. Asserting that fact isn't an argument any more than asserting the fact that gravity exists tells us whether or not we should jump off a roof. You know, in my non-music related day job, which I'm not going to divulge, but you might be able to take a fairly solid guess, my colleagues and I have to deal with ethical use of AI on pretty much a daily basis. It's something which has become so pervasive in our field, with human beings trying to use it to exploit the system to their advantage, that figuring out how to navigate it now occupies such a significant amount of time that would much better be served elsewhere. And of course, we're not unique in that. It's pretty unprecedented that the entire global social and economic structure has been upended in such a short amount of time and with so little warning. I'm fortunate enough that I think my occupation is relatively safe for the time being, at least the next decade, hopefully. But who can be really sure about anything at this point? Things are prone to change at a moment's notice. Think about the venue involved in the initial story we looked at. They're now going to have to waste probably an awful lot of time overall scrutinising the acts that they book to ensure the integrity of their work. That idea would have seemed completely absurd just 5 years ago. And the funny thing is that the older I get, the more grateful I am to have been brought up in a time before any of this stuff was even available. And thank God I completed my final year of university when ChatGPT was at least still relatively in its infancy. You know, I think a large reason for the prevalence of generative AI in general relates to a culture that's just increasingly focused on instant gratification. Deliveroo, Ozempic, steroids, OnlyFans, cherry-flavoured nicotine, and AI platforms like Suno sit right in the midst of this flood. So maybe the prevalence of AI speaks to a broader social decay or pessimism. I realise I'm getting off topic into more broader social commentary here, but the point is, just because your plane has lost both its engines doesn't mean you might as well just dive it nose first into the ground on purpose. So anyway, now that I've attempted to respond to some of the more popular arguments from AI proponents, I have one question in turn for such people. Not just those who engage in the proliferation of AI music, but actually all AI art and creative content. And that question is, what exactly is your motivation? What drives you? Why do you desire to be involved in industries which, I think, let's be honest, have so much wrong with them and offer so little in return? When it comes to corporate interests, we all know what the motivation is: profit. The less they have to rely on real artists, the greater their bottom line. AI doesn't ask for a living wage. But what confuses me is when it comes to people who use generative AI under the guise of creativity. What is the motivation? Obviously, the creative process itself is not it. As an independent musician myself, to date, I've released 2 albums and 1 EP, in between attending university and working a full-time job. I didn't have anyone to help me. I didn't have any family backing or support in that area. And I've made absolutely 0 pennies off of any of it. In fact, I've spent what any reasonable person would consider a huge amount of money just for the privilege of being able to do this. I have no expectation I'll ever be able to even break even on any of it, but that doesn't put me off. As a matter of fact, I'm currently working on another EP right now. Why is that? because I love the creative process. That's what gives me drive. You know, when I was about 16 and stupid, I considered myself libertarian because of course I did. That's just the natural order of male adolescence. But at that time, my favourite book was obviously The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. Seriously, I've actually read all of her major works. I still have no fucking clue what the actual correct way to say her name is. Now, I'm long past that phase in my life, thank God, but every couple of years I find myself coming back and rereading this. Just to be clear, I'm not recommending it at all. It's a bad book. The repugnancy of Rand's overarching morality aside, it's just poorly written on so many levels, but there's still some aspect of it which, even now with a fully developed brain, resonates with me on some kind of a base level. In the story, Howard Rourke is an architect, and his philosophy and style of architecture, which is basically modernism, is derided by his contemporaries and society at large. Throughout the story, he's shunned, mocked, has to scrape by, but none of this dissuades him from pursuing architecture as his craft. And his motivation is summed up pretty concisely and in typical Rand fashion very bluntly in these quotes. Before you can do things for people, you must be the kind of man who can get things done. But to get things done, you must love the doing, not the secondary consequences. I like to receive money for my work, but I can pass that up. I like to have people know my work is done by me, but I can pass that up. I like to have tenants made happy by my work, but that doesn't matter too much. The only thing that matters, my goal, my reward, my beginning, my end, is the work itself. My work done my way. And I think that in artistic fields, especially independent ones, this is the very philosophy which drives creative people. Kind of ironic given the source material. Not financial gain or fame or recognition, although all these things are great and will be nice, but they're secondary. The main driving force is the creative process itself. And please don't get me wrong here, I certainly don't presume to speak for the motivations of all artists and creatives, but I do think there is a shared fundamental drive which is present within all of us. That's the fire which is being carried, as Cormac McCarthy might say. A much better writer, who I do recommend, by the way. AI does not carry that fire. It can't even comprehend it on a self-aware level. And if your passion for the creative process is strong, you'd be amazed what a driving force it can be. Prince famously went through a period where he was writing and producing a full song from beginning to end almost every day. Now, of course, he was doing so at a time where the means to be able to do so were available to only a very select group of elite people. But as we've already discussed, the wonderful thing about today is that we've advanced technologically to the point where that accessibility is wider than it's ever been. And if the genuine desire is there, you'll find a way to do it. I was impassioned enough to say something on this subject that I basically sat down and wrote pretty much this entire script in one sitting, which is probably why it's been so meandering and rambling all over the place. And yes, after spewing up however many thousand words this essay ends up being, I copy-pasted it into ChatGPT and asked it to format it into an actual script which could be read coherently on camera. So you see, once again, to hammer the point home, I'm not opposed to AI as a tool to aid in the pursuit of genuine creativity. I actually think it's great that certain things can be far less burdensome and laborious. I often think back to how many hours I wasted at university checking and double checking my citations lists to make sure I didn't have a comma out of place that would knock a mark off. Time which could have been actually spent writing a better paper, learning the subject content. And look, I think I know what the real motivation behind a lot of AI creators is, because ironically it's a distinctly human one. Deep down, everybody wants to be creative in some capacity. Everyone wants to make something that moves people, whether that be through writing, filmmaking, dance, music, whatever. That's a purely human, completely reasonable desire. But wanting the feeling of having created something is not the same as having actually created it. And AI platforms like Suno are basically instant gratification machines designed to give you that illusion. And overall, personally, I think that's the really depressing thing about a lot of this. Not the theft and misappropriation of artists' work or the intellectual dishonesty of keyboard warriors, but rather just the broader creative and cultural bankruptcy. The focus on instant gratification in an economy that's becoming ever increasingly just attention-based. The feeling that we're accelerating full speed towards the world that Idiocracy envisioned. I mean, is this just where we are now? Has the human spirit really said all it has to say, and now we're ready to just defer all higher potential over to a crude imitation of our former selves? Unfortunately, it kind of feels like we might be approaching that stage. I realise I'm sounding pretty pessimistic here at the end of all this, but maybe it's time to really take stock of and appreciate our own communities. If you want to know how you can support real human artists, check out your local live music scene. Spend $5 or $10 on a ticket this weekend. Buy some shit overpriced merch for $20. In doing so, you're participating in something that's real, that's human, that's authentic. And God knows we could really use some more of that. As Voltaire said, let us cultivate our garden. Also like this video and subscribe, and follow Aiden and his band on Instagram. Oh, and also check out my shit on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever, the Chamberlains. I just realised we've still got one music video on this channel from like 3 years ago. We shot it on an iPhone, like 2 hours, garbage, but it was fun. Anyway, thanks, see ya.
There is no place for generative AI slop in the live music scene. The appeal of live performance is that it is raw, it is passionate, and that it is human. AI music delivers none of this, while robbing the opportunity to do so from genuinely talented human musicians who can. As this becomes more commonplace, venues are going to need to work harder to protect the very human artists that have kept patrons coming through their doors before the scene that keeps them alive dies off entirely.